senior centers like the one I was talking about in the Bay Area in Boston too? You're based in Boston, if I'm not correct, if I'm correct,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. They're everywhere. There are definitely senior day centers popping up all over.
But
Uh,
one's for South Asians?
oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Typically,
Okay.
for these, yeah. They offer they offer Indian meals, Indian activities, events. They
Yeah.
celebrate all the different holidays. Yeah,
Yeah. That's great.
yeah.
Because just
I mean, I
having
just Yeah, I was just creating, we just started an infographic series where for each large metro area, we're creating sort of a resource list. And so I just did, I mean, I did the one for the Bay Area. We did one for Boston. And just in Boston alone, there's five, six, I don't know, just,
Mm,
Desi senior
mm.
day center.
Wow. And are they, do you think that they are catered to a ethnic group among the Desi community, or are they sort of open to all?
Open to all.
Oh, okay.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, they're open to all. I think they're Indian, right? So then it's,
Yeah, yeah.
but and maybe maybe not all the participants are Indian. I mean, they could have non-Indians as well, but
Sure.
the food and everything else is catered towards the Desi population.
But
So
within Desis, there's so much, let's call it variety.
there's a lot of diversity, right? And so you just have to keep everyone happy.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I guess having all these different locations is important too because traveling far for seniors is a big issue.
Right.
So having more of them closer for each, different areas is so important.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, the ones here, they'll provide transportation, pick up, drop off meals. There'll be um, some sort of a medical person on site.
Mhm.
And so and then drop off, right? So that way it helps with the loneliness factor.
Yes.
Yeah. And these are dedicated facilities, meaning, okay, like bricks and mortar spaces. That's
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I was at one, which is brick and mortar. They also do community events. They'll do health fairs and such, but it is it's an actual place for it.
Actually, yes.
Yeah.
And all these locations are run by the same organization, or are they all different?
All different, all different.
Lovely.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think
that's really
I
heartening
mean,
to hear.
yeah, I mean, I am obviously more familiar with the resources in Boston. I'm not sure about, the Bay Area, but as far as I know, there's a lot more popping up. So
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think as the community is realizing that there is this demographic that needs what, they have special needs, they're starting to sort of come together, band together, and create those services. So
Mhm.
I think
great.
we're
I
ready to
think we're
go.
ready to go. Yeah.
Okay, I'll get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of Chai and Chat. I'm Anjana Nagarajan Bhutani,
And I'm Mira Kaimal.
and today we are joined by Salina Shah, the founder of Desi Daughters, to talk about gaps and solutions when it comes to aging and caregiving for our community in the United States. Thank you, Selena, for taking the time to be here on the show where people can ask you questions in real time about how to better care for our elders and ourselves. Do you want to just introduce yourself, Selena?
Oh, sure. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, India Currents, and thank you to all the listeners. I'm happy to be here and answer questions, and I'm sure we'll talk more about my work and They See Daughters as we go.
Great. I'm just going to run over a few housekeeping rules before we get started. For those of you in the audience, please introduce yourself in the comments because we love to see where you're joining us from. And we do want you to participate in the conversation. So put your questions in the comments and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. Please be patient because there may be slight delays in getting to the question, but we'll try and get to all of them as quickly as we can. Please keep your comments respectful and on topic because this is a positive space for all of us. And don't forget to hit the heart button if you're enjoying the conversation. And so we're going to go about 45 minutes, so settle in and enjoy the conversation. So I'm going to kick this off with you, Selena. Desi Daughters is such a great name. Can you tell us the story behind your organization?
Thank you. So the story behind the organization is just it came about from observing around me all many friends and family members, everyone kind of going through the same phase of life where we're juggling different roles at the same time and not having the resources for ourselves in terms of being able to, I mean, none of us are really trained or prepared for this role to begin with. And so I thought, okay, let's create a space, a common space for all of us to come together, share information, learn from each other, right? Otherwise, everybody was sort of recreating the wheel on their own. And so that's how it started, just a private community on Facebook, 100, my goal was, okay, we'll get 100 people. Um, as of today, we're over 13,000 members, and it's been quite a journey, but it's been one that I think for me the motivation was to make sure that other members of our community, especially working moms, were able to easily find the resources that they need to navigate this phase.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit about the sort of services that you provide?
Yeah, so the services I would say fall under two pillars. One is community powered support, and then the other one would be basically resources. So, from community powered support standpoint, um, a lot of members, the members that are in that 13K plus community, they're asking each other questions about, what's the best realtor to buy my mom, or how do I get cameras installed, or where do I find a caregiver? What about a facility post, knee replacement surgery? They're asking each other all different questions. How do you manage and handle the juggle and family dynamics, right? A lot of questions like that. So that's one aspect of the community power support. The other is local chapters. We have local chapters across the US as well as India, where instead of asking 13,000 members, how do I find a Desi caregiver in the Bay Area? You can actually ask in the Bay Area chapter.
Mm.
And then that way people can share their knowledge and expertise and provide insights to each other and arrange, coordinate different activities as well. And then also in that community sphere is support groups. So we have virtual support groups for people to talk about family dynamics, caring for somebody from afar, Parkinson's, dementia, all sorts of, host of topics. And then on the resource side, it's self-serve resources, webinars,
Mm.
as well as checklists and guides.
What are some of the biggest challenges or needs that people reach out to Desi Daughters for?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest one is looking for home care help.
Mm.
And what was surprising to me when I started it, I thought it was going to be people in the US, South Asian diaspora located in the US trying to find culturally compatible resources. So they see resources in the US. What has surprised me is that a lot of people are here, but looking for help in India.
Mm.
And I assume that, well, it's India. You can find somebody who speaks the language that you need or what have you. But what I found is that a lot of people are struggling with reliable, trustworthy, just knowing, how to do this and where to get a recommendation from. And so a lot of people, that's probably the number one question that gets asked in the community is, does anybody have a recommendation or referral resource that they would share?
What do you think Desi Daughters brings to the table to our community?
So what I think it brings is it's a central spot to share our experiences, right? And at the end of the day, the reason that it exists is because the US was just not the healthcare system, elder care system in the US is not designed for the immigrant communities, including ours, right? So what I see is that a lot of people were struggling with bridging that gap between these formal systems and then how to help immigrant seniors. And so that's the role that we help with is instead of everybody figuring this out on their own, we offer a bridge. and we connect people to the resources that they need.
I know you had your own personal caregiving journey. Can you share some lessons you learned along the way?
My journey started really early. So I lost my father when I was 22. And then a few years later, I lost my mother-in-law. So my husband and I, for the past 20 plus, years, we're, navigating our careers, raising three kids, and as well as helping support our parents. And so through those years, there's been, there's been a variety of lessons. I think a couple of the big ones would be the importance of coordination and communication amongst the family. So, having a shared Google Drive with all the information about the medicines and the medical team and the insurance documents and a history of all the the procedures and such. That's a big one. And having, using remote health monitoring devices, wearables, things like that, especially when you're caring from afar, that can be really helpful and provide some peace of mind. And then just leaning on others, when we needed to put in a stair lift for my father-in-law, or when we needed to figure out how do we help him with technology, but from afar, right? So I leaned on others to help with recommendations, and that was actually the impetus for starting Daisy Daughters, to kind of bring that ability to everybody.
Thank you, Selena. Before we go to the audience questions, there is a question in the chat asking how do we find your platform? Could you share the URL or tell us where it is? We can just share it in the chat.
Yeah, so the URL is daisydaughters.com. And then also the Facebook group is just Daisy Daughters on Facebook. There's that's where the main community is.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to start by thanking everyone who registered and sent in their questions. We received many questions in the RSVPs that came back from people who are joining this conversation. And in the interest of time and clarity, we've sort of consolidated, we've combined some of the questions. So I'm going to start off with the question about caregiving. Caregiving in our community is often seen as a family duty in our culture. And how does that expectation shape the way we approach care?
It takes a couple different forms, I think. Part of the reason of the name, Daisy Daughters, is because a lot of the responsibilities and the expectations do tend to fall on daughters and daughter-in-laws, which is why, the community is 90% female. But we do have sons and son-in-laws in the group as well. Um, I think what I find is that another aspect of it in terms of how it shapes care is that it restricts it. And what I mean by that is, if you take expectations off the table and you go to a certified senior advisor and you ask, okay, this is what my elder has, this is our situation, what are our options? They will give you a whole list of options, right? In terms of different facilities or services. However, when you then apply the cultural expectations lens on it, some become non-viable. And so it's almost like we have this illusion of choice, but then the cultural expectations sort of narrow it, right? And so I think that it's not helpful to have fewer choices, right? I think it would be better to discuss everything and then as a family come to a decision about what is best, given the family dynamics.
One of the biggest challenges as a caregiver, those of us who've been in that place, is finding reliable caregivers to help us out. What is your advice on that? Where does one find, or where would you go to source a reliable caregiver?
I would I would do it the same way you would for, a nanny, right? I think it's recommendations, references, somebody else who's used somebody. I think, when we did a member survey, actually, we found that most people in the community would actually turn to the community first to
Mm,
ask. because I think knowing and hearing from somebody else who understands the cultural context behind hiring this person, um, you just feel like they get it and they understand what you're looking for, and it just makes for a better fit. Having said that, it is very important to make sure that you find somebody and do your own, as you find somebody, it's important to do your own due diligence in terms of making sure that they're licensed, they're qualified, they're authorized to work, all of those different things to ensure that the person that you do find is actually qualified enough to provide the care that's needed.
Sure. We have a couple questions from our audience from Mukund Acharya, who's one of India Current's very good friends. Um, I'll start with his second question. Is the request for home care help usually from Indian South Asian caregivers? Is language an important requirement and familiarity with Indian food?
Yes. Usually, yes, I do find that the questions in that I see in our community, people are looking for desi caregivers, and it's because they're looking for caregivers for parents who are in their 80s, in their 90s. This is what's familiar to them. This is the language that they're, most comfortable in. Food, same thing. This is, it's a source of comfort. Um, and at the end of the day, if you can serve somebody's, not just their physical needs, but if you can serve the whole person and, bridge that cultural gap in terms of their preferences for foods and language, spiritual practices, all those things, the individual, the care recipient feels seen, they feel heard. There's trust, connection that's formed. All of that leads to more, better compliance with physical activity regimen and medication adherence, ultimately leading to just a better health outcome. And so that's why I think having that fit with a Desi elder caregiver for a Desi elder tends to be one of the biggest requests that I see.
Sure. This is another question about the cultural component of families that are mixed. When you have a multicultural family or an inter-ethnic family, um, how does the caregiving sort of expectations change? Have you seen that in the communities that come on Desi daughters? If people who come from mixed marriages ask questions about caregiving that are different from what you would see normally in in an Indian family.
I haven't I haven't noticed as much, but what I would say is the same. Um, I would advise the same as I do for the same cultural and same ethnic family compositions, which is look at all the options, right? Because depending on the family composition, you might arrive at a different you might arrive at a different decision or path. And so ultimately I think it's sort of recognizing that there are a lot more options, and I would think that in intercultural arrangements, you're more likely to not have those cultural expectations that narrow your choices, and you are more inclined to take a look at everything.
Sure, thank you.
Interesting.
And my last question is again from Mukundacharya, and this is about the caregiver. What tips or advice would you have for caregivers on effective ways of caring for themselves?
That is something that we don't talk about enough. I think, we did a survey and about 30% of caregivers just were struggling with finding time to care for themselves while caring for an elder. Everybody has a different way to do it, and it depending on their circumstance, they may not even have the time. But I would say, to if possible, continue doing as much of the things that you enjoyed doing before you started doing, spending more time with caregiving. So whether it's, a hobby that you enjoyed or, you know, shopping therapy or, girlfriend time or, um, even finding 5 minutes, like if you're rushing from different activities, you pull up to the house, 5 minutes in the car, decompress before you walk in the door, right? You just have to find some way that makes sense in your life, where you can sort of recharge for yourself.
Now, getting into some nitty-gritty finances, which is always a difficult conversation to have in any case. What sorts of costs are we looking at? What do we have to think about? Do you have a sense of what it'll take to take care of an elderly parent at home? What are the different, even if it's not exact amounts, what are the different aspects of finances that we have to think about?
So I think the first is that Medicare does not cover most of these expenses. So I think there is a misconception that, okay, my parents have Medicare, they're going to be fine. Not true. Medicare will only cover things that are, Medicare is health insurance, right? It's going to cover short-term things in a skilled setting. Um, it's not long-term care insurance. So you have to budget for these expenses. The national average for home care is probably in the $30-$35 an hour range. It can go upwards of that though if you're in a higher cost of living area and depending on the intensity level that your elder needs, right? If you're looking at assisted living places, average is probably 6,000 a month, going up to 10,000 plus, again, depending on if you're looking at memory care, or if there's, additional intensity level services that are needed. And the other thing that I'm seeing is actually a lot of people looking and exploring places in India because you get a lot more resources and services and care for your elder for a much lower, price point, which it's obviously far and that as well, but it's just something that it's just a practical reality with the expenses that people are starting to look at.
We had a couple different questions about this. I'm going to try and paraphrase. So when we look at aging, maybe even it's just us, how much are there numbers on how much we should save for our own care, not knowing our needs, of course? And is there any steps we can start doing now to prepare for when we age?
Um, I think the most important thing is to get informed, right? So start looking into what does, what are the costs in your area? What are the resources in your area? If you're in the US, there are always local area agencies on aging that you can talk to find out more resources that are available. You could talk to a certified um, senior consultant who they usually will do a complimentary consultation to help you figure out options and costs. So that way you know kind of what to budget, talking to a financial planner. Everybody's sort of needs are going to be different. It's hard to kind of say what it's going to be for any specific person, but I think just starting to think about it, starting to research, starting to figure out what your options are when you get to that stage, and then and if you have a sense of like, well, I want to age in place, I want to be in my home, well, start thinking about, well, what are the hourly rates? What does that look like, and how much do you need a budget for that?
As a follow-up, I have one more question. Um, when and how should you start the conversation with your children as you're aging? And what do you think are some of the most top level discussions you should have?
So I actually think when it's the senior who raises the topic, it's a lot easier
Hmm?
than when it's the adult child. Um, so if you're the senior, don't hesitate, to raise the topic with your adult children because adult children will find it very awkward to start asking about, well, should you still be driving? Or do you need help in the house? Or is it time to downsize? These are awkward things for us to raise. And so it is definitely better coming from the elder and raising those questions and those discussion points.
Okay.
I think
Um,
was there another question in there?
No, no, I mean, there's lots of questions, but yeah, let's.
Yes, there's lots of things that we want to dig into, but we'll do we'll try and cover the ones that we think are relevant and that have been asked. So there's been a bunch of retirement communities that have sprung up across the US, and what would you say is different about them compared to the typical American retirement community? And if someone is looking into a facility like that, what should they look for?
Um, yes, there are definitely more of these communities coming up nowadays. In fact, my mother-in-law lives, well, my father-in-law lives in one, and actually my mother is in the same one, and my sister-in-law's mother-in-law is in the same one. So these are communities where it's sort of a tight-knit, I guess you were asking what's the difference between these communities versus the general ones. And the differences, I would say, are primarily going to be food.
Hmm.
Uh, they're serving Indian meals that are, um, usually vegetarian Indian meals are being served. They are celebrating all of the Indian holidays, events. They have programming where they'll go to, if there's a Pratham fundraiser or Ekal Vidyalaya, right? I mean, you're still engaging with your community, and I think the biggest difference is that it's a community where you can connect to peers who have the same cultural background and shared history and memories, right? And so it's um, it's a place where I think that's why seniors like it because it feels like home for them. A little bit of India in the US. And in terms of what you would look for in one, I think, the standard, gated community, look to see what the, the monthly ongoing expenses are going to be relative to, if you're purchasing. Look at what's nearby. How far away is the nearest medical facilities, and providers? That's also important. And just, how active the community is in terms of its own, their own events and activities that they provide.
There are quite a few very specific questions about retirement communities in the US. Let us know if you can answer any of them. One question was, are there any Desi-centered facilities in California? And how about vegan elder care communities in San Francisco Bay Area and beyond?
So, Desi-centered retirement communities in California, yes. The Bay Area, uh, Bria Living is in the Bay Area. That's the only one that I'm aware of. We actually recently created a map of all the Desi retirement communities in the US. And I think that was the only one in the Bay in California. Vegan elder care communities is an interesting question. I'm vegan, so I would love to know if there is one. I haven't heard of one, but I will keep a lookout for that.
What's the best place to retire on the East Coast from an affordability, cost, and climate point of view?
If you're looking at the East Coast, you're pretty much asking Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, Southeast. From a climate standpoint, if you want the warmer weather, that's basically pointing towards the Southeast. If you're looking at affordability, then I would say steer clear of like high cost of living, New York Metro, DC Metro. But the flip side of that is that if you go to a very remote place, will they have the social activities and events? Will you have easy access um, to an airport, right? To go visit your loved ones or for them to come visit you.
Mm,
And again, if you are looking at a Desi community, those tend to be in and if you're looking at the East Coast, there are at least three in Florida,
hmm. Is there a network like this in Canada?
like
Do-
Desi Daughters.
yeah.
So I am not aware of one. At the same time, Desi Daughters is in Canada. So we have members in Canada. We actually just recently started a chapter list for Toronto.
Mm,
And so we do get questions about Canadian resources as well.
that's good to know.
Mhm.
Um, Moving on to dementia. Dementia care requires a very special set of skills, whether it's from the family or a paid caregiver. Do you have any advice for our community?
So I have not yet I haven't yet experienced that personally. Um, but I do know that it has become very prevalent within our community, so much so that we've actually started a dementia special group within Desi Daughters for people to talk about it, as well as Parkinson's. These are just really specialized conditions that require a lot of just more specialized support, resources. I think talking with others who are navigating that same path
Mhm.
would be helpful. And then obviously seeking support from dementia care groups, whether it's, within Lacey Daughters, or even there are also general, dementia caregiving groups as well.
Loneliness is another huge challenge for the elderly. Do you have any tips? Do you have any advice on how people can find resources to help?
This is also another big question that comes up, whether it's in the US or in India. Loneliness is something that a lot of our generation is, concerned about for our parents. And so within the group, a lot of people will ask each other, does anybody know, or they'll ask it within the chapter actually. So within like, the Dallas chapter, does anybody else have a parent? And I see people arranging meetups through that. But I think, there's also one nice thing is in the US, there's a lot more senior, Desi senior day centers coming up. So that way, at least during work hours, there are places for them to go and have and socialize, have activities, eat together, and those are, starting to come up in different, pretty much in all the metros. I think if you, inquire at the temple or, other sort of Indian community centers, you'll be more likely to find those options.
Okay. Shall I move on, Anjana, to the next set? So, Selena, one of the issues that our community has to deal with that we don't necessarily always deal with until it's too late in some cases is dealing with end of life issues. So there are several questions about that, but I just want to just talk a little bit about we don't plan for what will happen after we're gone. We don't always plan for what will happen if we get to the point where we can't make decisions about our end of life situation. So, in terms of, DNRs or power of attorneys, where does when should one begin doing that? How do you talk to your family about getting that process started? So I'll start with that and then I will kind of read some of the specifics that people have asked.
You're right. Our community, we don't talk about it, but I do think that it's sort of a general challenge. They're just, across the general population, people don't talk about it. So in terms of finding support and when it's time, if you're thinking about it, it's time. I think that, if you're listening to this conversation, if you are listening to the recording, it's time to start thinking about this. The way to get started is because it's not like a on-off switch, right? You can start slowly and start asking questions gradually and kind of build up to these topics. Um, there's a couple resources that I like. The first is called the Conversation Project. And with that, it's a nonprofit and they have free guides. They're kind of like workbooks where they talk you through the conversation and how to have these, how to discuss these decisions. Another one that I like is called Five Wishes, another nonprofit. They have a guide, or they have actually it's an advanced directive, and it's in the style of a workbook that you fill in together. What I love about them is that it's written in very plain, simple, easy to understand language, so you actually understand what you're agreeing to or what you're communicating in terms of your wishes, and it is legally recognized in almost every state. And so as an advanced directive, so that's another, another one that I like. And as you mentioned, it's obviously important to get your healthcare proxies in place as well. I think a lot of elders might be concerned about, will my wishes be respected and honored? And the best way to ensure that is to make sure to get it down on paper, and do this while you can still articulate and communicate what your wishes are.
Yeah. Um, when and the resources you just referred to are to do generally with how to plan for your will, for for your funeral perhaps. Are there any that are culturally relevant to, say, people from the Indian community? Because the ceremonies that happen, that may need to take place in a funeral home. If somebody wants to take their ashes back to India, nobody thinks about those things. I mean, there are separate steps involved for the Indian community. Can you tell us a little bit about resources that might help with planning that aspect as well?
You're right. So we actually just put together two resources along those lines. One is on funeral planning, and it talks about ashes and bringing ashes back to India. It talks about what you need for the ceremony, and we have a guide on sort of last rites that you can refer to. We also have we put together a list of like Goshala feedings, right, for anybody who wants to do the cow feeding rituals after somebody has passed, and where can you find that in the US? And then there's also like a place that does it online in India as well. So that's those resources are something that we're working on to make sure to kind of flush those out even more. But it's something that we started because unfortunately we are seeing a lot more people needing these resources. And one more resource that would be relevant is, when it comes to bereavement and coping with loss, we do have a Hindu spiritual chaplain that we connect people to who are, having a hard time sort of, coping with loss.
Okay. Yeah, Anjana, you're mute.
That's very helpful. Um, you've mentioned so many resources that we don't know about, and you never need them till you need them. Do
Correct.
you know, and I know that, state to state, county to county resources that are available are very different, but in your experience, are there resources that are being underutilized by our community that they don't even know exists?
Um, yes, because we aren't looking for them until we need them, and then it's an emergency. So I think, that's part of what I'm doing with the chapters is right, is like letting everybody know, okay, here are the resources in your area. So for example, if you're in the Bay Area, here's a couple of resources. So there's Helper Genie, which actually is beyond, it's broader than just the Bay Area, but they have pre-vetted they see elder caregivers as well as nannies and other helpers. South Asian Care is another resource that is it's across the US actually, but you can find they see healthcare providers who maybe speak in the language that you're looking for. Um, Care Yaya is another one that it's a national organization where they are connected to health allied students on campuses like Stanford and Berkeley, and and those students provide really affordable but support to seniors. So that's another one. I think via PACE has senior programs in California. There's also the in-home supportive services, IHSS, that can help pay for pay for care, but I think a lot of it is until you need it, or you still until you start, looking for it, you won't realize that it's there. So I think once you start, you'll find it, and we have a lot on our site, but you can find. I think once you start, you'll see that there are services out there. I do think partly some of why it's underutilized though does get back to the cultural expectation because there is that feeling that, well, I should just be able to do this, on my own. I've got it. Um, and there's a feeling of like guilt, like, oh, I have to ask for help. And so I would still encourage people to go look at resources because it's they're there and they can be helpful and then I think one of the challenges that I see is people like let's say it's a daughter wanting to be a daughter, not a caregiver, right? And so if you have help, then you can do that.
Yeah, well said. Yeah. We have a question from Mukund. He says, men can join Desi Daughters too, right? Can older men like me who don't have parents but are interested in your mission join and be informed with news, updates, and advice from you and your membership?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a newsletter, and that's also where the local chapters are. And so, joining that, you'll find that off of our website. Actually, all the links are off of the website, and that's where anybody can join, men included, as well as anybody who is maybe caring for a spouse, or if you have an adult child who has, health challenges, again, we have people who are, it's for anybody who, can use the resources for a Desi adult.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you have any other last couple questions?
A few, because I think we have some time
Yes.
to ask a few more questions. So we live in an age of AI, Selena. So has your community turned to AI to sort of help in the caregiving process, or finding information, or even something as simple as making sure a parent has information that they take their pills on time? How can AI be utilized by those who can in helping the aging process?
I think first it's important to think about where AI should be used and where it shouldn't be used. So, for example, I think it's great for information, and empowerment. So, learning about what does Medicare cover? What does it not cover? Learning about how does FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act work? When can I use it, right? For example, you can't use it for your in-laws, but you might be able to use it for your parents. So that sort of research it would be good with. It can help with maybe creating a care plan or task lists for a home helper, maybe used to look for medication, interactions. And then there's also AI is already embedded in a lot of our apps that we use, wearables, right? So if you're using any sort of remote health monitoring devices, um, it can be very useful there just to keep an eye on your elder, especially when they don't answer the phone. And also just assessing, fall risk, or location tracking. I think those are good uses of AI, right? To be able to help us care for our elders, but I think what we don't want to do is have it replace the connection and the bond that we have with our elders.
You're muted.
Is there a fee to access Desi Daughters website and info?
Oh, no. No, Daisy Daughters is a free platform.
I have another follow-up question. If the primary caregiver is the spouse who is an elder themselves,
Yeah, we have those.
um, what do you often find are the biggest issues that crop up there, and how can we help our community with that?
Yeah, it's a tough challenge when you have two elderly people and they're trying to sort of care for each other. In some ways, it can kind of grow to become like a symbiotic relationship where it works. And until one parent's not there, and then it kind of all falls apart. But I think I think sometimes in those situations, it takes the adult child to step in and say, you need some help. And it's hard, right? Because a lot of elders will resist having somebody new come into their home and, new routine and somebody who they're not familiar with. So again, this is why I think, at least if you can find a Desi caregiver, I think it just makes that transition a little bit smoother. Um, but yeah, we do see that situation. We see elders taking care of their own elders. Because with longevity these days, 80-year-old taking care of a 100-year-old, like it's tough. And especially I think the biggest concern there, and with the question that you had asked, is making sure that they are taking care of their own health.
Hmm.
Because I think the studies show that for somebody who's doing long-term caregiving, it can shave off, I mean, it can reduce lifespan by up to 8 years just from all the stress, the anxiety, the depression that long-term caregivers go through.
Do people in the community, I'm going to ask a difficult question because sometimes our parents tend to listen to their sons more than their daughters. They have emotional relationship with their daughters, but they go to their sons for information. So do daughters tend to run into that problem where they listen to their sons and not to the daughters?
I don't think parents listen to anybody sometimes. Um, I think, we have parents who are here. A lot of this, a lot of why this is an important discussion now is because the elders that we see in their 80s and 90s, they were some of the earliest immigrants to the US once the doors opened in the mid 60s. And so they're still very independent and they want to remain so. And so it's hard to start, interjecting and pointing out that they need things. And so I don't know if there's a gender role there in terms of who can convince
Mhm.
the elder to do so. But I would say that there's a lot of they will look at peers. So if
Mhm.
they see a peer, starting to have a helper or starting to use a cane or starting to use a walker, they are far more likely to feel like, okay, well, that's acceptable. I can do
Mhm.
that too.
One last question from the chat before we wrap up. We're almost at time. We're at time, but maybe we have a minute, I hope. Um, does Daisy Daughters run any workshops where they disseminate the kinds of information that people are looking for, or do you know of any other spaces which do workshops that people can go to?
I think that was a very, I'm not sure which resources.
Finding
We
out about financial planning, for example.
Yeah, so we've done webinars along those lines before. Actually, we do we once a quarter we definitely do one on financial planning, especially for women, because what we have seen is that it's a lot, and again, goes back to the name daughters. It's a lot of the women who are leaving the workforce early, retiring early, going part-time, switching to lower intensity roles, which is putting their own retirement
Mhm.
and savings in jeopardy. And women tend to outlive men, and so it's sort of a double whammy there. But so we do webinars along those lines, and we are looking at doing more workshops as well, and bringing that, especially like care planning workshops. That's something that we have on the roadmap.
One last rapid fire question for you. If there's one thing you wish every South Asian family would start doing today to better prepare for aging and caregiving, what would it be?
Mhm. I think it's just starting the conversation. If the caregiver, the caregiver, sorry, the conversation project, they have a saying that says that. it's always too early until it's too late.
Mm,
And so I think you can't be too early in starting to have the conversation with your parents. Um, the one other thing I'll just add to that is, um, you know, have the conversation with your parents, but um, filial piety, respect for elders is such a big thing in our culture. And so we want to help our elders. But the other piece of advice that I would say is do not help your parents do things that they can do for themselves,
mm,
because that just makes them less independent, more dependent on you, and nobody wins in that scenario.
well said.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. Um, So we're at time. So I want to say thank you, Selena, for sharing your insights with us. This has been a great conversation, lots to think about. Also want to thank everybody who joined us. I hope we got some of your questions answered. Please do contact us if you want more questions addressed. Let us know what are the topics you'd like us to talk about. This conversation is part of a larger effort that we are running, where we're doing a project this year, understanding aging and how we can help our parents age with dignity. This is going to be a monthly conversation, so do reach out to us. There's a link below, I think, in the chat. And so thank you everyone for being here. I want to say special thanks, shout out to Prachi, who actually organized this entire event. So thank you for pulling this together, Prachi. And Anjana and I were really pleased to have this chat with you, Selena, and we look forward